Thanks for tuning in with Talking with Tatum. I'm Barry Tatum, and I'm really excited about the program that we've got for you today. It's something that I think that every parent, every guardian, anybody who's responsible for raising children needs to be aware in our time. And it's about social media and smartphones. And here with us today is Special Agent Dennis Fetting.
Yes, sir.
Welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me here.
Well, I appreciate you getting here. I know we've had to juggle the schedule a little bit to accommodate yours and ours, but I've had the pleasure, or the experience, I guess I should say, of attending two programs that the Department of Homeland Security has put on locally.
Yep.
Advising people about the dangers and the risks to children that can be found through a smartphone or a laptop or any electronic device through social media.
Yeah.
And I think you've got an awesome story to tell, something that every parent should be aware of. But before we get into that, I would like to get a little bit of background. You and I have just met a few moments ago, but tell us where Dennis Fetting grew up and how did you wind up in Tennessee as a special agent with the Department of Homeland Security?
Absolutely. No, first of all, great intro, and you're right. I think the thing that we're going to talk about today is extremely important, especially in this day and age when we're handing kids smartphones and devices at earlier and earlier ages, and they're kind of integrated in that digital environment. There's a lot of bad things, great things with technology, but there's also some bad things going on, things that we're seeing in law enforcement and in the government that need to be addressed. And so, yeah, who I am. So as you said, Dennis Fetting, Special Agent with Homeland Security Investigations. So it's HSI. We are the primary investigative arm of the big Department of Homeland Security, that federal agency. We're the second largest federal investigative agency in the U.S. government. We have about over 10,000 personnel, all told, intel analysts, special agents, and other folks that are support personnel into our investigations all around the world. We're a global agency. Our main mission is basically going after transnational criminal organizations. So whether it's narcotics traffickers and cartels, or money launderers, or human traffickers, or folks that are engaging in child exploitation online, which is sort of what we're talking about today, our mission is to essentially dismantle those large organizations. And so we have about 30 what we call special agent in charge offices across the country, over 250 or so small sub offices. I'm out of the Nashville office, so we cover all of Middle Tennessee, from about the Tennessee River on the west to about the Crossville area on the east, and then the northern and southern borders of the state. And so me, myself, I was born in Missouri. You know, you and I had talked, very quickly getting acquainted, moved all around the country. I'm sort of a geographic mutt, if you will, but I did start, so I started my career in law enforcement as a support guy, working intelligence, as an intelligence analyst for the Treasury, targeting money launderers. And then I got my first job as a criminal investigator, a special agent with the United States Customs Service. This was before DHS was even something that existed. And my first duty station was in Miami, Florida. And I was working violent crime, narcotics, gangs, and then we eventually morphed into the Department of Homeland Security and then HSI. So I spent time in Miami, then I transferred up to Newark, New Jersey, and I worked in that environment up there. Then I did a headquarters tour in DC, and I ended up in Nashville as a group supervisor in 2013. So I've been here in Tennessee for a little over 11 years. Love it. Have a family here. Don't want to leave again. Tennessee is an amazing place, in Middle Tennessee specifically. I love it here, and so that's sort of that's who I am, and that's how I got here, and then a little bit about my agency too.
Well, that's a good overview of where you came from and how you got to where you are today. Moving around a lot when you were young, you mentioned that when we were talking before we went on the air, your father was in the computer business.
Yep.
And whenever he got a promotion that necessitated a move, and that was the reason that y'all relocated a lot. I grew up in an era where computers were things that took up a whole floor in the building.
Sure.
And used punch cards.
Sure.
But did you see yourself or have an interest in getting involved in any sort of cyber career when you were growing up, based upon your dad's work?
No, I really didn't. He did work for a computer company, and honestly, he's 81 years old. He was in the computer industry when it was also kind of that giant computers, and they worked through all of those phases. And I remember as a kid sort of having this idea, like, I'm not exactly sure what dad does, but I know he works in the computer industry. However, really what happened for me was when I got here in 2013. Nashville was what we call a resident agent in charge size office. So it was a one group investigative office, 10 special agents, all working all of the crime types that we investigate. So, like I said, we investigate narcotics trafficking. As an agency, we put probably our most manpower hours towards narcotics trafficking, going against the cartels and smuggling of fentanyl and things like that. But our second most manpower hours goes towards online child exploitation and abuse. When I got here to Tennessee, I quickly realized that even though we work all those crime types, child exploitation was the leading case category in Nashville for my agency. I knew that was a huge problem. I knew it was something that we needed to do a little bit more on. And so we started not just working those crimes more heavily, but we also started getting in front of the community, doing educational outreach, what we call Project iGuardian presentations, which I know you had said is where you first sort of saw this problem. And so for me, it was really seeing what's been happening to the kids in our community, how it's just destroying families. It's, it's kind of ruining kids' mental health. Parents are being, so upset. Victims that we identify of horrendous crimes at the hands of online offenders. Right. That is really what got me so passionate about this particular thing.
You mentioned that when you came here in 2013, you saw that Nashville that was a problem in Nashville. Was it a problem in other Nashville-sized cities throughout the country, or was it more prevalent here?
No, absolutely. In every city in the nation, essentially, this is a crime type that's on the rise. Just talking about some statistics of interest. So we partner heavily with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, what we call NCMEC. NCMEC is an amazing organization that does a lot of different things for law enforcement. One of the big things that they do is whenever we find child pornography, which we now are calling CSAM, child sexual abuse material. I know you're a judge. Yep. So I know you're very familiar with legal terms, and in statutory definition, child pornography is the statute. But really what we're trying to get folks to understand is call it what it is. This is child sexual abuse. So videos and images of horrible things happening to kids, even kids self-producing that imagery is what we're now calling CSAM, and we're actually trying to get that into the legislation just to call it sort of what it is, to really call out the issue. And so, that issue now, so NCMEC, going back to NCMEC, when we send CSAM material in NCMEC, they house and catalog all that for us. They identify victims, they label series of videos and things that help law enforcement combat this problem. Well, NCMEC also takes in a lot of the cyber tips, leads essentially regarding this crime type. So in 2014, when I first got here, started doing these presentations, coincidentally, that was about the first year that NCMEC received their first million cyber tips regarding online child sexual abuse. 2014. Last year, they published their numbers, and they had received 36 million individual reports of online child sexual abuse. So
10 years has increased.
That's right. And it seems to be moving in the trend of anywhere from 2 to 4 million more tips every single year.
Well, one thing that I've seen happen in my career, when I started, smartphones were not a thing. In fact, when I started, I wore a pager.
That's right.
It goes back that far.
That's right.
But now, with the technology that's available, that started in, I guess, the late 2000s, maybe, you have access to the World Wide Web in the palm of your hand with a cell phone.
Yep.
And back years ago, I had an expression I would use in court, and I said, Facebook is a tool of the devil, because I would see how things that never were an issue when I was growing up were blown up into a huge issue on social media. And the other scary thing is seeing how much many arguments, disputes within the family occur because of access to a cell phone by a child. When a parent tries to take it away.
Sure.
As far as the cell phone itself, I think you made a great point. It's a good thing for accessing information. It's a great tool for communicating. But young people particularly do not understand that when an image is taken on a phone, even if it's deleted, it's not really deleted, is it?
That's right. Yep.
Well, and certainly if you share that image with someone else, if you post it online, or if you just send it to a friend, use air quotes for friend.
That's right.
Then you don't know where that picture's going to wind up. where that information is going to wind up.
100% right. So one of the things that we're telling parents and children, we go and talk at schools. We speak to groups as young as fifth grade all the way up through high school. And then, of course, we have parent presentations that are really the high level, kind of hard hitting, telling everybody what they really need to hear. One of the things that there's a few things, but that you hit on that are so appropriate. Number one is the permanency of data. Every single thing that leaves a device is permanent in some way. And I say that because there are apps now, commonly used apps, Snapchat, one of the most popular apps with teens. It has entertainment value. But what it also sort of breeds into children is this idea that if they send out a snap, an image, something like that Snapchat, that it'll go away after a little bit of time. And the problem with that thinking, and it's not just Snapchat, I'm not targeting that app. There are many apps that sort of give that idea that, hey, you can post something here and it's not going to be permanent, it'll go away. Mm-hmm. Number one, a lot of that data gets stored on servers. So I can get that data back as a law enforcement, individual with subpoenas. All I would have to do if somebody sent me a message in, let's say, Snapchat, and I took another phone and took a picture of that, I now have that, so that doesn't ever disappear. There are apps designed to capture that type of thing, that you can keep in perpetuity. And so really getting it into the minds of a child that every single thing they send out has permanency, and that as soon as they send out a photo or a video or even a text, a chat, they lose control of it because whoever receives it can do whatever they want with that. So that is a big one in and of itself, but also something to hit on. I think it's important for parents to know about is, and I really didn't even learn this until maybe 5-6 years ago. I was talking with some clinicians at the Sexual Assault Center in Nashville, right, and they were explaining to me that the frontal portion of the brain, that which controls things like long-term consequence thinking, empathy, the balance between, hey, if I do this thing, a reward versus a punishment, I'd rather do the pleasurable thing, not really thinking about the consequence, that's not even fully formed until about the age of 22, 24 years old.
Early to mid-20s.
So your point, if you hand what is now a supercomputer, an iPhone, an Android device, and put it in the hands of a 12-year-old, and you allow them to go on social media or post or search the net, that essentially, they will not physiologically be able to navigate those problems or think about, when I send this out now, how will this affect me when I'm 17, 18 years old and I want to go to college, I want to get a job, I want an internship, I want a scholarship. And so, yes, all the things that you said are true. And so we're really trying to train parents and talk to kids to make them aware of that permanency of data.
And the other thing that I think is important as well is the criminal element.
That's right.
That you've investigated out here. They're no slackers either. They are constantly on the make for trying to exploit people.
Yep.
Whether it's information, whether it's images, whether it's data in some way. And they have found a vulnerable niche here with kids. And one of the things I would like for you to talk about, Agent Fetting, is examples of the tragic circumstances where kids have been blackmailed through what I would call sexploitation.
Yep, sextortion. That's right.
Sextortion.
Yep.
And if you could just give us some examples about what has happened in real life, some even in Middle Tennessee.
Yeah.
As to how something that starts off innocent can snowball out of control.
Absolutely. So when we talk about child exploitation, just to kind of explain it to the listeners and the viewers, so my job, our job, and really, I also want to highlight, so as federal agents, we work this crime type, but we work this crime type hand in hand with state and local authorities. So we have, across all of Tennessee, we have ICACs, Internet Crimes Against Children task forces. Okay. We actually have a Wilson County Sheriff's Deputy that's a task force officer with us that works this crime type. We have a Mount Juliet detective that's a task force officer that works with us. The Tennessee ICAC Command is in Knoxville, but TBI has a full group of ICAC detectives that work nothing but this crime type. Metro has that, and all of the state and local municipalities all work this crime type. And I only highlight that because this crime type has become such a problem that it requires every state and local and federal entity, and we still couldn't arrest our way out of the number of cyber tips that we're getting. And so when we investigate a crime that stems child exploitation online, we really have two goals. The first one is to identify and rescue victims, especially if they are the victims of hands-on offenses of some adult predator or someone that's actually physically touching these kids and then filming it, posting that CSAM material on websites that exist on the darknet, which there's plenty of those. And then the other one is to target those offenders and bring them to justice. So those are the two things we work on. So when I do these presentations, I talk about a really high level case. I think it's important for parents to understand that, I'm 46 years old, so I also had what I like to think is a decent chunk of my life where there was no internet, there was no phones. I'm happy about that because I didn't have my whole life recorded on some timeline or whatever. But I think when we were young, if there was some predator or pedophile or kidnapper, whatever people think or whatever term they want to use, maybe it was some stranger in the neighborhood or some guy driving around in the white creeper van or something like that. And that was our common shared experience. But what we are finding now is the internet is basically bringing together like-minded predators, those who are interested in children sexually. They have forums to chat with each other. They have sophisticated IT professionals in their ranks that are creating websites for them to share CSAM material. The darknet, which is basically the hidden underbelly of the internet, you can access with a certain type of software. There are fully functioning CSAM websites there at all times that we target and dismantle. And so I think it's important I can highlight one case, and I'll try to keep it a little bit brief. It was a great case that we worked, and it wasn't just us in Nashville. We worked it with our office in HSI Boston and several other in Virginia and other offices, as well as overseas, our partners in Australia, Great Britain, Italy, Germany, and the list goes on and on. But basically, not that many years ago, there was a website, a CSAM website that existed on the darknet. It was the largest one that ever existed. It was called the Pedo's Gift Box, the Pedophile's Gift Box. We called it the Gift Box.
It was actually called that.
It was called that, yep. There's no hiding it on the darknet. This is their advertising what they do, and that was the largest child exploitation website that ever existed. And it wasn't just that one. That site and a few others were all being run by two main offenders. And the whole world that cares about this was essentially trying to figure out who these guys were, because the darknet uses a certain type of software called Tor. It's an anonymizer. It's very hard to figure out where these people are at. And so for the longest time, we only knew about these people as by their names that they used online, which was Crazy Monk and Warhead. And so for the longest time, we were trying to figure out who these guys were. They were hands-on offenders of children. They had chat groups and forums for other offenders around the world to talk about how to groom children, how to meet them online, how to post things, how to avoid law enforcement. And so after some really great work by our office in Boston and HSI Boston, they identified through some, I'll just say, just because we're on a live podcast, some great investigative techniques. They were able to figure out that one of those individuals was identified as an individual named Patrick Falte. The other one then, after tracking Patrick Falte's movements, figured out that the other guy's name was Benjamin Faulkner. So those were the two main individuals running the worst of the worst things happening on the darknet. No one knew who they were. They could have existed anywhere in the world that there was an internet connection. So Benjamin Faulkner was a citizen of Canada. He was in Toronto. And Patrick Falte was a resident of Franklin, Tennessee. Franklin, Tennessee. He lived in Williamson County. He did contract IT work at, Nissan's global headquarters for a little while. He was living sort of down near where 65 and 840 live with his parents. So the most wanted child predator, essentially, was living in Franklin. And I point that out in my presentations because I want folks to know Williamson County, great county, Tennessee, beautiful state, and yet, dark things happen here too.
Right.
And the internet is sort of the great equalizer. And so that's an example, though. So
tell us where he is.
Well, to close the loop, because for the true crime folks that are super interested in this type of thing, so we needed to figure out how. So of course, as soon as we figured out where he was, we and our partners honed in on these guys, and we worked that case here in Nashville and prosecuted out of the Middle District of Tennessee for the enterprise that they were running, their global enterprise. But eventually, after some time, Benjamin Faulkner and Patrick Falte decided to meet up together in Virginia. And they actually met up in Virginia with the intention of abusing a little girl up there whose father had allowed them access to that child because he wanted to be a VIP member of their website. We were able to arrest, it was our office in Virginia, our guys in Boston were able to arrest those two together, dismantle that network. So they're doing forever in prison, essentially. They're in federal prison right now. They're never getting out.
That's all they're getting?
That's about all we could do, in this crime type. It's about all we can do, but they're never getting out. But, one of the things I highlight is it was great investigative work. And to be honest, I think as a law enforcement community, the folks that worked on that case should be very proud of that. However, the damage essentially is sort of done in the way that like we talked about the permanency of data, every video and picture that they created and hosted and shared amongst that community is still out there now on other pedophiles' computers, other predators' computers. the individuals that we arrest, even to this day, have learned tactics from guys like that online on how to avoid us using public Wi-Fi and other things. And so that, long story sort of, but kind of a good example, I think, to show folks there are global IT professionals that are in this, and sometimes they live in our community. So,
Well, that's I guess what you would call a success story of putting two creeps away for life.
sure.
I certainly hope something happened to the father up in Virginia.
Well, yes. In fact, just so you don't have concern, there were many other hands-on offenders of children that were arrested, not just in the U.S.
Good.
but globally. And honestly, there were several child victims. These poor kids that were being sexually abused that have now been rescued, removed from those situations, put in safe situations. So that case all around was very solid case. And we work cases like that, unfortunately, probably far too often.
But there's also instances where you've had teenagers or young people who have put pictures out on the internet, not realizing they were talking with a pedophile,
Absolutely.
thinking that they're talking with another young person. They're asked to do something that's embarrassing. They do it, sexual in nature, and then the next thing you know, they're on the hook, being threatened, extorted. Talk about some examples of that, about what can happen.
Absolutely. So we see that. So sextortion, one of the things we talked about, which is basically when an offender gets a compromising image or an embarrassing video or picture from a child, and then holds that over their head, uses that for two purposes now. It used to just be for more content. They wanted children to take more pictures or meet them offline or do something like that. Now we have transnational criminal organizations like West African organized crime that's gotten involved in financial sextortion of children as well. And so the key to that is the number one tactic of these adult predators in the social media realm is they're pretending to be something that they're not, and they normally have a profile that looks like same-age boy or girl or around about that same age as those kids that they're targeting. And so the way it looks, and we see this time and time again, is they will meet kids on a social media platform, or maybe they're in an online game, whether that's tablet-based or console-based or computer PC-based gaming, and they will groom these children. Sometimes it's just compliments and being friends, but we've seen even gifts, cash app payments, jewelry, perfume, football cards. The list goes on and on. We've seen that stuff being sent to houses via Amazon with the idea of gaining these kids' trust and then eventually soliciting images and videos from these kids. And so when, unfortunately, these children get tricked into doing something like that, that's as soon as sextortion starts, and then they will hold it over their head and they will say something like, look, I have all of your pictures. I know all of your contacts on social media. I know your church. I know your family.
Know your school.
That's right. And if you don't now start doing all of these different things for me on webcam or send me more photos, I'm sending these pictures out to all of your friends. Your parents are going to know what you did. Like, these are the horrible tactics that they use.
Yeah.
Children are so scared, they don't know what to do. They don't know to come talk to their parents. They try to hide it. The problem with hiding it is law enforcement doesn't know what's going on. And then it's just a continuous spiral, because if they do give content, usually those guys don't go away. And it's mostly males. That's why I say guys.
Yeah.
They don't go away. They're just going to ask for more. And so these children start to feel like they're in like this never-ending cycle. And we've seen a rise in teen suicide because of that type of thing. Also, though, on the financial side, the West African financial sextortion, for example, the way that looks, and it's almost a classic blueprint at this point. We're seeing lots of teen males, mostly high school age boys, sometimes late middle school, that are being targeted, where these West Africans will, usually on Instagram, will message them looking like a same-aged girl or maybe an early 20-year-old female. They have profiles like that. And they will basically say something like, hey, look, you look hot, or I'm interested in you, or something like that in the app itself. And the boys will begin direct messaging with them in Instagram. They'll send an inappropriate image, meaning the Ivory Coast folks will, looking like a girl, some nude image or something. And these boys, not thinking, being hormonal, making mistakes, will send some inappropriate image back. The West African group or any other crime group will then take a screenshot of that photo, take a screenshot of their contacts, message them and say, hey, look, I want you to wire me $500, $800, $1,000. They'll instruct them how to do it. Again, peer-to-peer payment, Cash App, Venmo. Go down to your local Walgreens, load a prepaid card. What's your dad's credit card number? Even kids who have, hey, do you have a bank account? Here's how you can wire me funds via cryptocurrency. We've seen all of that, and that's in Middle Tennessee. That's not New York or some random. That's here in Tennessee. And with that one, unfortunately, children are also not wanting to tell their parents because they don't want to get in trouble. And so we've seen payments being made There have been news articles, if you Google that type of thing, there has been, again, teen suicide related to this financial sextortion. So yes, it's a crime type that's on the rise. It's not going away, and parents really need to know about it.
And it's also one of these things, you talked in both instances, where in essence, the perpetrator, this criminal element, puts a lot of effort into grooming and gaining the trust, false trust, of their victims.
Yep.
And which is a classic sign of a pedophile, that you get yourself in a close proximity and develop that comfort level, if you will. And it's so easy to do that through the internet where you're not having that face-to-face contact. So it's absolutely terrifying to me as a grandparent.
Sure.
And dealing with what I deal with in juvenile court, I just shudder to think what kids are faced with today. You mentioned before we went on the air that you've given some presentations in Williamson County at a couple of schools the last couple of days.
Yeah.
And of course, I've seen your programs that you've had here in Lebanon and Wilson County. Do you speak exclusively to schools, or can it be a civic group or a church? What are the parameters for somebody to get in touch with you and say, hey, this is something we would like to offer our community?
Yeah, you and I were talking before. I said I'm sort of well warmed up for this because I just came from an elementary school this morning. I did a presentation for parents. The night before that, I was over at Brentwood Middle School, and I did a presentation for parents over there. But to answer your question, so yes, our agency instituted Project iGuardian, which is under the umbrella of Know to Protect, which is a campaign that we've got going on. And there's some great resources that I'd love to share with you that you could share, via this platform. But through Project iGuardian, we'll go just about anywhere that anyone will have us. It's free. We do it as part of our outreach mission in law enforcement. We do it because, again, like I said, we can't arrest our way out of this problem, and we need more families and more kids to know about this. So we speak at schools, we speak to students and adults, but we go to lunch and learns at corporations. I've done church youth groups and Bible studies and full church congregations. We've done Boy Scout groups. I've done sporting groups. I've gone and talked to hockey teams down at Centennial downtown, or I mean baseball teams, you name it. If there's some group that needs us, we go and we talk, because it's so important to us that we try to get that message out there.
Well, I'm sure we'll have some contact information on the screen here, but for somebody who's maybe good at writing down notes or has a photographic memory or a great memory, what would be the best way to make this happen for a group?
So if you don't already have a contact with us, a lot of our referrals, because we've been doing these presentations now for over a decade in Middle Tennessee, a lot of those just come in through, they just know who we are and they contact us. But for someone who doesn't know us, never talked to us, right. One of the great places to start is knowtoprotect.gov. And so it's KNOW, the number 2, protect.gov. And via that website, you can request an iGuardian presentation for your organization.
Okay.
And what happens is I helped create that website, and I worked with the team at DHS to do it. Pretty quick, pretty speedy. I've actually gotten referrals from it. You just fill in some information, where you're at and what type of group you have. There's a program manager in headquarters that gets that. They know where it's at, and they shoot that referral back out to us, and then we reach out to that contact, and we usually can set something up when we can. I think it's important for folks to know that, it's not our day job. It's just something that we do because we care so much. And
you're out there investigating.
That's right. And so we get there as soon as we can. And it may sometimes be a couple months that we have to wait to schedule something, but we do our very best to kind of serve the folks, the communities in Tennessee, because it's super important to us.
Well, there's also a lot of resources on the internet.
Absolutely.
That parents and grandparents can get on and say, rather than sitting through waiting for a program to come to town or to that group, what can a parent do today? What are some good websites or contact information where they can say, what can I do to protect my kids from this smartphone that I've got on?
Sure, absolutely. So knowtoprotect.gov is a great spot for government, but we work with a lot of NGOs, non-governmental organizations in this space. So NCMEC, the National Center for Missing Exploited Children, has netsmarts.org and netsmartskids.org. Those are both great sites, not just to learn about what's going on, but to get educational resources and handouts and pamphlets and some really age-appropriate videos. Let's see, thorn.org is an amazing organization that specifically targets this crime type, and they have lots of information and videos that are out there. Thorn as in the like a pricker, like a thorn.
THORN.
That's right, thorn.org, and hopefully we can maybe find a place on on the YouTube channel or something where we can put some of these, but commonsensemedia.org, the Carly Ryan Foundation are both great entities that also have a lot of resources in regard to this crime type. So those are just a few, that we recommend that folks go to learn a lot more about this, to get, again, just to sort of find out what's happening, because we can sit in front of a group for an hour, but I could probably just tell case stories for an hour. We could talk for 6 or 7 hours probably about this. And so, pushing people towards those type of resources is an important thing to do.
Well, I wish there was a way that you could send like a 1,000,000-volt electric charge back through the internet to the basement where these creeps are set up.
Sure.
And just vaporize the problem. But obviously that's not practical. It's not doable. It's illegal. But nonetheless, I wish there was some way to head this off. But I really appreciate you taking your time to tell your story, to tell about what you do as a father of children. I'm sure this is a concern that's near and dear to you, just like it is being a grandparent. And I hope that our listeners have gotten some great information out of this. And do you have any programs scheduled in Wilson County, in Mount Juliet, Watertown, or Lebanon, or any other areas locally that you're aware of?
I have to look at our calendar because we're here all the time. We actually just did a very big one for Wilson County. It was sort of a community event. Beth Petty, who works for Lebanon Special School District, which shout out to Beth Petty if she listens or watches this, because
Beth Petty has run out of room on her back.
She is, I sort of say, like the unofficial mayor maybe of this whole area. And anyway, I've done a lot of school presentations with her. I just off the top of my head can't think of one right now that's out here, but we are constantly in Wilson County, in Lebanon, trying to do outreach, for the folks.
Well, I hope that maybe some folks that are listening that are tied in with a civic organization, or maybe a church that wants to do a community event, they use this as an opportunity to reach out and hopefully schedule, because this is a message, in my opinion, that needs to be beaten into people's heads. It's I look at it as, when I was raised up, there was no such thing as a car seat.
Sure.
You just you rode
seatbelts, car seats.
You rode in the rear dash. Laid up in the rear dash of your vehicle, there was a bench seat that you hopped back and forth. There weren't helmets, there weren't knee pads, anything like that, which may explain a lot of the problems that I have. But nonetheless, our society has learned that there's a real benefit to having car seats. There's a real benefit to using seatbelts. And that the risks that are out there are real, and are life-changing, life-ending in some cases. And we've gotten this new technology with a computer and a smartphone, which presents a risk that's just as real. We just haven't caught up with how to deal with it yet.
True.
From your background, I know that there's legislation being bandied about to ban certain social media platforms. Or also to ban cell phones in schools. What are some practical things that, from your perspective, and that a parent can do? What kind of limits can be put on about access to a cell phone or social media?
Excellent question. I appreciate you asking it, because honestly, that is the way we wrap up our presentations, is by giving like a top 10 list of extremely free and extremely easy things that parents can do to mitigate most of the risks of what we've seen in our investigation. So one of the biggest ones is sort of password protecting or preventing access to that either Google Play or App Store, where kids are getting all of their apps for their games and social media, and monitoring what they're doing in the online gaming environment. It's pretty easy to do. If you're using iPhone, you can just use a thing called Family Share, which is built in there. And if it's an Android device, there's similar settings. But the idea here is that you don't just allow your children to download any app that they want from those two places, and that's mostly where kids are getting their apps, is those two places, and that you as a parent screen the apps that they get, because classically the child victims that we see are the ones that have full access to any app that they want, and they're on social media and no one's paying attention. So that's a huge one, is password protecting, or at least blocking in some way that they have to go through a trusted adult to get the apps that they want. It's a big one.
Okay.
Preaching permanency of data, which we talked about, reminding kids, because they will not know it in their mind. So reminding them that everything that they send out has a consequence. That's another easy one that's free. It's just communicating. And also getting involved in snooping in their phone. When you decide to give them a phone or a tablet, as a dad, like you mentioned, as a dad, I think my stance has always been if you pay for that device or you pay for that Wi-Fi, there shouldn't be a password on that thing that keeps you out of it. And you should be able to search and check and snoop, because in reality, that's about the only way that you're kind of really going to know what's going on with your kid. And it's okay to do that, especially at an early age. So being involved, communicating is a huge one. Time and area limits. So in the house, especially when kids are young, keeping those devices in the kitchen or in the living room where people can see what's going on, because it's when they're at night in their room, door closed, that's where we're seeing the bad things happen when no one's paying attention. So that's a big one. Oh, let's see, what else? The friends lists. So we talked about the fact that the number one tactic of an adult predator is pretending to be somebody that they're not. So monitoring on social media friends lists. Me personally, and again, maybe I'm also getting to be old school, I don't think a young teen needs to have 1,000 followers on Instagram. That opens the door to nothing but strangers monitoring who they are and what they do. And we go through a whole live demonstration in our presentations where we call up Instagram and we show how easy it is for me to search the local school, and I can search through all the pictures on Instagram that were geolocated to the school, and I can click on a student's picture and I can get into their account, and it's probably going to be set to public, and it usually is, and then I can see every one of their pictures and I can follow them and I can message them, and that's how predators do it. So friends lists, getting rid of all those strangers, that's a big one, and then locking down all social media from public to private is the other one. Because using Instagram as an example, if I'm an offender and I log into some child's account and it's set to private, there's a big block with a little lock and it says this account is private. I'm going to move on because 8, 9, 10, 9 out of 10 kids are still unfortunately on public. Make your kid a hard target. So that's another one.
Yeah.
Location features. So lock down all of that geolocation on social media and on your phone from public to private. And that includes the apps that track us, Home Depot, Starbucks, all of those apps that want to know, collecting our data all the time. Where do we shop? How fast do we drive? Where do we go? All of that stuff is being collected. So shut all that off on your device, on your kid's device. If you don't need it, maybe maps, maybe weather, stuff like that, shut all that down. So that's another big tip. And then, lastly, save the evidence. So if something horrible does happen to your kid online, the things that we've described, the things that we've talked about, sextortion, that type of thing, if they're being contacted by an offender, I know it's like the mama bear, papa bear instinct is wipe this thing clean, delete, shut down. I understand that sentiment, but we in law enforcement, we need that as evidence. If we're going to target these offenders, we need usernames, we need phone numbers, we need IP addresses, we need pictures, videos. And so what we advocate is stop contact with the offender, block those accounts, don't do anything more in that platform, contact law enforcement. Then law enforcement will come out, take that data, freshen that thing up, make it clean so that no one has to be victimized again. But then that way we can work an investigation the way that we need to work it.
Dennis Fetting, I'll tell you, this program has been awesome. I had some great expectations. You've exceeded those.
Great.
About sharing the information. One thing I do like to do is provide our guests with a
This is
Talking
great.
with Tatum cup and a mouse pad. We're talking about computers, but I'm sure you've got plenty of mouse pads.
I love coffee, and this is excellent. I promise you, this is appreciated.
But thank you for your time. Thank you for your information. Thank you for your concern about young people and going after the bad guys.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's been a privilege, and I appreciate you being here. And I appreciate you for watching this program when Talking with Tatum. We've got some great information that's popped up through this program about resources for parents and guardians of children to protect them from the dangers of the internet, dangers of social media, some of which are life or death issues. So by all means, watch this program, tell your friends to watch it, and hopefully you can see one of these presentations live at some point and gather some really useful information. Until next time, I'm Barry Tatum, and thank you.